I have a past that I can't forget, or rather, I don't want to forget, no matter how hard I try. Now, I wonder if it was just a dream, but it was undoubtedly real. I have a wife whom I married at the age of 25. I joined an IT company full of men as a new graduate, and it all started when a friend introduced me to her. Her name is Crystal. She had a gentle and calm personality, while I was reckless and audacious. It was precisely because we were complete opposites that we were drawn to each other and dated for 2 years. I proposed to her and we got married. Crystal worked at a pet shop, and our lifestyles didn't match because of her shift work and my weekends off. However, we managed to get along by sharing household chores in the beginning. But after about 3 years, our relationship gradually destroyed. As I entered my late 20s and gained experience, I was entrusted with more responsibilities at work. It was something I was very happy about, but it also brought a significant amount of stress, both mentally and physically. From the beginning of our marriage, Crystal took care of kitchen-related tasks such as cooking, while cleaning the living room, corridors, and entrance was her responsibility. I was assigned to cleaning areas other than the kitchen and boiling the bathwater. Anything else was done by whoever noticed it first. Of course, there were days when neither of us could do it, so we were flexible about it. During this time, there were fewer days when I could handle my assigned household chores. One day, when I returned from work on the last train, I found Crystal setting out some ready-made dishes on the table. "Is this tonight's dinner?" I asked. She replied, with an apologetic look on her face.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got home late today and was tired, so I bought these from the supermarket over there.
She warmed up my portion of the ready-made dish in the microwave, transferred it to a plate, and handed it to me. I had already eaten ready-made food from the supermarket during the day, and I wanted a decent meal for dinner. I was thinking about such things in my mind, so I hadn't been paying attention to what Crystal was saying. Then I interrupted her and said, "Hey, could you boil the bath water for me?" Crystal widened her eyes and froze for a moment, looking a bit surprised. It's no wonder she reacted that way, since it was my responsibility to boil the bath water. At that moment, I thought to myself, I am so tired from working long hours. Please. Hearing my request, Crystal said,
Okay.
and proceeded to boil the bath water for me. And so, this continued day after day. I didn't really understand the busy season at the pet shop, but Crystal seemed to be working harder than ever, staying late and not being able to prepare dinner properly. This kind of lifestyle went on for about 2 weeks, and I finally spoke up. "Lately, aren't you slacking off a bit too much?" Today, I came home relatively early, a little past 10 p.m., but Crystal was lying on the sofa and hadn't prepared any meal.
I'm sorry. I bought some sandwiches from the convenience store today.
Crystal apologized, but I cannot easily hold my anger. I'm busy too, you know. But if we don't do what needs to be done, we can't sustain our lives. Let's do things properly. Even though I said that, Crystal only replied with,
I'm sorry.
and in the end, she hardly ever cooked meals for me afterward. I started getting more and more frustrated with Crystal. Originally, our busy schedules led to a lifestyle where I would come home, have a meal, take a bath, and go straight to bed, with very little conversation. But at that point, I had reached a point where I didn't want to talk to her at all.
Welcome back. Listen.
Crystal tried to initiate a reconciliation, approaching me and speaking multiple times, but I kept avoiding her, saying, I'm tired. And so, 2 months passed in that manner. It was ridiculous that as a married couple living together, we were avoiding each other like this. I knew it myself, but looking back now, I might have been using Crystal as a way to vent my work-related stress. That's why I received my own punishment. On a rainy summer day, when I returned home around 11 p.m., Crystal was nowhere to be found. Maybe she hasn't come back from work yet, I thought to myself, and without searching for Crystal, I collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep. It wasn't until the next morning that I noticed something was off. The room was bathed in sunlight. It somehow looked unusually neat and clean. Curious, I opened the closet, only to find Crystal's clothes gone. I checked the other drawers, and even the cosmetics and other small items were neatly emptied. I went to the living room, searching for a note, but there was nothing. I thought to myself that she must have gotten fed up with our constant fights and run away. With that in mind, I called Crystal's phone, but all I heard was a cold mechanical voice saying,
"The number you have dialed is currently not in service."
And so, my wife Crystal disappeared suddenly. I deeply regretted my recent behavior. I should have acknowledged that even I, with my busy schedule, sometimes slacked off on my share of the chores and said that it's natural to have such moments. I should have welcomed her attempts to reconcile instead of pushing her away and face the situation properly. It's something you truly realize only after losing it. But even though I may be angry now, she'll eventually come back. And when she does, I'll apologize properly. At that time, my thinking was still naive. 1 month has passed since Crystal's disappearance. With work finally slowing down, I had more free time. Because of that, I found myself thinking about Crystal even more, and I was plagued with anxiety that she might not return. During that time, when I was consumed by those worries, I received an envelope without an address in the mailbox. It had been directly dropped in there since there wasn't even a stamp on it. After returning home, I opened the envelope and inside was something shocking: divorce papers. For a moment, I thought it might be some kind of prank, but there was already Crystal's signature on one side. It was undeniably her handwriting. I searched inside the envelope for anything else, but there was nothing. Why? Why did this happen? My attitude had hurt Crystal and made her even think of getting a divorce. But if that were the case, I had hoped she would at least tell me face to face. It was frustrating to think that our communication ended with just a piece of paper. But I had only been to Crystal's family home once, which was far away, and I didn't remember her address or even her phone number. Seeing that she had directly delivered the divorce papers, most likely to prevent any tracking for postmarks, it was clear that she didn't want to see me anymore. It was regrettable that I had done something that caused her to avoid me to this extent, even though we had once loved each other. But there was no way for me to convince her anymore. In the end, without being able to gather the resolve to go through with the divorce, I had held on to the divorce papers for several months, but she didn't return even on our 5th wedding anniversary. Taking into consideration Crystal's feelings, I signed the divorce papers and submitted them. Tears involuntarily welled up in my eyes as I stood at the place where we had once submitted our marriage certificate, never expecting to come back here after 5 years had passed. 3 years had passed since then. I couldn't give up on the idea of seeing Crystal again, so I had asked mutual friends if they knew anything. I even went to her hometown in San Francisco, but I still couldn't find her whereabouts. It was during that time that I heard from a friend who was living in Los Angeles that they had seen Crystal. Maybe she didn't want to see my face anymore. That's what I thought. But I knew I couldn't forget unless I saw her with my own eyes and heard her true feelings. I also desperately wanted to apologize. I decided that if she found it bothersome, I would immediately leave. With that in mind, I headed to Los Angeles. However, in a crowded city like Los Angeles, it wasn't easy to come across her. I spent the entire day wandering around the station I had heard from my friend's friend. This is starting to feel like stalking. I suddenly came to my senses and began to feel timid, wondering if I should just go back. But at that moment, a familiar face passed by right in front of me. They didn't seem to notice my presence, but it was Crystal. There was no mistaking it. I saw Crystal for the first time in 3 years, and tears almost welled up, but I managed to hold them back since we were in a crowded place. Crystal was looking around, seemingly searching for someone, and beyond her gaze, with a joyful expression, was Crystal's mother and a little boy who said,
"Mommy."
The boy hugged Crystal and happily said,
"Grandma bought me a toy."
with a smile.
"That's great. Did you say thank you?"
Crystal, with the serene face of a mother I didn't know, said that and lifted the boy up in her arms. She remarried. I selfishly hoped that I could meet her again after these 3 years and apologize, maybe even start over. I never imagined that she had remarried and was leading a new life. If that's the case, there's no point in meeting her. It would only bring back unpleasant memories and disrupt her current happiness. There's no role for me to play. I live with her, but I can't remember the last time I saw her smile. If she's smiling so happily now, I have to think it's a good thing. But if I could, I wanted to be the one to bring that smile to her face. No matter how much I regret my past mistakes, time won't turn back. I could no longer hold back my tears. So I turned my back to Crystal and hurried towards the restroom at the station. That's when,
May I have a moment?
I was called out from behind, and when I turned around, there was Crystal's mother. But Crystal and the boy were not with her, and I felt a mix of relief and disappointment, a complicated feeling.
Are you Kevin?
Crystal's mother seemed to remember me and asked, "It's been a while," I replied. In response, Crystal's mother nodded and said she wanted to talk a little, so we went to a nearby cafe. As soon as we took our seats, Crystal's mother apologized, saying,
I'm sorry for what my daughter did 3 years ago.
"No, it's actually the other way around. I truly caused Crystal a lot of pain. I'm the one who should apologize. There are so many things I want to ask, like why Crystal disappeared without saying anything, how she's living now, and if that child earlier is really Crystal's child. But I couldn't bring myself to ask, fearing that it would come off as prying. Then, Crystal's mother asked,
Why did you come here today?
but I couldn't answer that question immediately. Even though we parted ways 3 years ago, I thought it would be creepy to come all the way to Los Angeles just to chase after her. But should I honestly tell her that I want to see Crystal? Once again, I found myself in a dilemma. Then, Crystal's mother asked from her side.
By any chance, did you come here to see Crystal?
Finally, I responded, yes, that's right. I wanted to meet her again and talk, to apologize. That's how I answered. And then, Crystal's mother uttered surprising words.
Please meet Crystal.
Huh? I had thought I would be rejected because she was walking a new path.
I think that's the only way for both of you to move forward.
Those words brought both joy and a slight pang in my chest. After settling the past, it seemed that Crystal's mother had expressed her wish for her daughter to be happy in her new life. In the end, it was decided that Crystal's mother would relay the message to her, and we agreed to meet at the same cafe the next day at 2 p.m. I had longed to see her. I was happy to be able to meet Crystal, but at the same time, knowing that this might be the final meeting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. The next day, as I waited at the agreed-upon location, Crystal arrived.
Long time no see.
Crystal, without looking into my eyes, said that as she took her seat. Maybe she really didn't want to see me anymore. That's what I thought, but I had already accepted that when the topic of divorce was brought up, and I had decided to express my feelings so that I wouldn't have any regrets. Thank you for coming today. Since the divorce, no, ever since Crystal left, I have been regretting it. I convinced myself that I was the only one suffering, and I didn't try to understand your feelings. I think that only made things harder for you. I'm truly sorry. I've wanted to apologize for so long. I said that and bowed my head.
Please look up. I'm the one who should apologize for leaving without a word. I didn't have the courage to face it properly.
As I said that, Crystal shared her feelings at the time.
We both noticed that our work was becoming busier, and we started drifting apart. I realize now that I was only thinking about myself. I think I was probably the same.
Crystal quietly spoke, which was surprising as I had expected her to be angrier. But that was because this was already in the past for her, a closed chapter. I was the only one who attached significant meaning to this reunion. When I thought that,
At that time, I was actually unwell.
that was news to me.
I mentioned it to you a few times, but you were always so busy, so I guess you don't remember, right?
As Crystal said, I didn't remember at all.
That's why I couldn't even prepare meals properly, and I started to think that you might get tired of me. It made me feel so down.
Upon hearing those words, I remembered how Crystal would always lie down because she couldn't manage to cook meals every day. I'm sorry for not noticing. Were you okay? Were you sick or something? Caught up in the stress of work and lacking awareness, I couldn't even notice Crystal's poor health. I truly was a terrible husband. It's no wonder she divorced me.
It wasn't an illness. I was pregnant.
Those words reached my ears, but it took a significant amount of time for my brain to process and understand. Finally, the response that came out was one of utter foolishness.
It's your child.
As Crystal said that, a tear trickled down from her eyes. Seeing my continued astonishment, Crystal continued speaking while tears streamed down her face.
Something felt off, so I went to the hospital, and it turned out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed, thinking that maybe we could go back to being close like before. I thought this child could become the angel that would connect us. So I wanted to tell you as soon as possible and tried to talk to you multiple times, but I couldn't find the right moment to discuss it calmly.
It felt as if all the puzzle pieces had fallen into place. That's how it felt. Her poor health and her repeated attempts to talk to me, everything was because she was pregnant with my child.
Then, I started feeling more and more anxious. I wondered if you would be happy about the child, if I could be a good mother. Everything became so frightening, so I turned to my mother for advice. At first, I had no intention of leaving. I just planned to stay at my parents' house for a few days. But then, I became afraid of whether we could understand each other if we talked. I ran away. I'm so sorry for keeping such an important thing a secret for so long.
Saying that, Crystal lowered her head once again. About the child? I asked nervously. Then, Crystal replied,
It's a boy. He's now 3 years old and growing up healthy.
Could it be the child I saw with you at the station yesterday? I believe my voice was trembling.
Yeah, that's right.
Upon hearing those words from Crystal, tears started streaming down uncontrollably. The smile of the child who hugged Crystal and called her mommy still lingers in my mind. He's my child. Before I knew it, I was holding Crystal's hand. And then I couldn't help but say, thank you. Upon hearing that, Crystal also shed tears. I'm sorry for my terrible attitude and not realizing that you went through hardships for the sake of our child. I've been selfish, and I'm truly sorry. But all along, I wanted to tell you, if possible, if you can forgive me, I want to live with you again, Crystal. I want to be a father to that child. Can you give us another chance? The time between my plea and Crystal's response felt incredibly long. But Crystal held my hand back and said,
That's my line. Yes, thank you.
After that, Crystal took me to the house where she currently lives. Despite meeting my son for the first time, he didn't show any shyness and happily said,
Did Daddy come back from far away?
He embraced me with joy. It seemed that Crystal had explained to our son, who had seen other families at kindergarten and wondered why his father wasn't there, that I was far away. Furthermore, he said,
Mommy told me that Daddy is a kind and funny person.
In Crystal's and our son's eyes, they didn't treat me as someone absent but as someone who had been living here all along. It made me incredibly happy. Afterward, I returned to the headquarters once and then transferred to the branch office in Los Angeles starting from the following spring. Until then, we had been meeting on weekends by train, but considering the 3 years we couldn't see each other, it felt like a short time. From now on, surely there will come a day when I will consider spending time with Crystal and our son as something ordinary. However, I will never forget that having that ordinary daily life continue is not something to be taken for granted. It is because we were once separated that I believe we will be bound together by a strong bond. And so I will begin walking with my family once again.